As always, it's such an honor to come and to participate with this community. As I've mentioned before, thanks to your David and just the multiple times I've been able to share with you, it feels like coming home. And as I continue to do the work that I do, which is, if you want to call it teaching and ministry, there's always something that drives me to try to simplify it or to make things more granular, to not be so caught in intellect, but to find tangibilities in the intangible, to find application in the seeming non-consciousness of just navigating this human experience. And so with that kind of setup, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a couple of phrases or the jargon that we use in our New Thought community. So there's the word non-attachment, and there's the word open-hearted, which was read in our opening reading today, and beginner's mind. All of these things, we formulate a concept in our mind of what we think they're supposed to be, right? Non-attachment. Get your bloody knuckled grip off of the how. Open-hearted. I remember, I think it was Edwene Gaines used to talk about every night before she went to bed, she had to look and examine who she had removed from her heart, no matter what it was that they did, and bring it back in. And a beginner's mind, a language that is often used in my background of science of mind with regards to maintaining or keeping a beginner's mind, a fresh perspective. So again, great concepts, things that we talk about all the time. And yet I find that they only have meaning. They only sort of go beyond the surface into the deeper part of the soil when we are aware of the opportunity to use them. And usually the opportunity to use them is when there's something kind of polar opposite to those kinds of words, right? So I was thinking once, you may remember me talking a little bit about my history with Louise Hay and being in a singing group called Alliance. An Alliance formed because of a friendship that I had in college at Oral Roberts University. Don't judge me. And Jerry Florence. Jerry Florence was a senior. He was a brilliant musician, and I was an incoming freshman, and I was working all kinds of jobs trying to get more scholarship money. And he was in charge of something called Summer Music Ministries. And one of the ways that I could get more scholarship money was to audition for these singing groups that would travel during the summer and promote and lure unsuspecting youth to come to Oral Roberts University. I guess you could say that makes me a big hypocrite, but I wanted the scholarship money. So I auditioned as this fledgling little green freshman for these bands and got into one. And Jerry Florence oversaw the whole program. He had to rehearse, I think it was 12 bands. He had to get a repertoire of 20 plus songs. And not only that, then he had to book 12 different groups all across the country. And mostly they were one-night stands in Christian churches all across America. And every group was given a territory. I remember getting the South. That was my territory. So there was a lot of mayonnaise and cucumber sandwiches eaten among mosquitoes and flies that summer. But it was unload, set up the equipment, sing, do the thing, talk about Oral Roberts University, pack the sound equipment up, go and spend the night at a host home and be back on the road the next morning for an entire summer. And it was bearable because I was fascinated and in awe of Jerry's musicianship, of his skill, of his management. And so I thought, going back to Oral Roberts University as a sophomore won't be so bad because I'll just shift some of my focus more to the music department, only to discover that he got fired that summer and he would not be coming back. And so that meant more of my little version of hell on earth to finish, to graduate. And so I was really disappointed. And we all arrived back 2 weeks before the school started, unloaded the vans, and checked all the inventory back in. And Jerry told everybody what a great job they had done and thanked everybody and announced that he wouldn't be back. And we talked afterwards, and because I was really kind of upset, and he threw this thing out and he says, you know what? I feel like doing something wild and crazy. Do you want to do something wild and crazy? I said, yeah, let's do something wild and crazy. And remember, he was like my idol. And so his version of wild and crazy was to borrow his sister's van and go down to Corpus Christi, Texas, and go deep sea fishing. Never been deep sea fishing before. I had been seasick many times on a boat, but I had never been deep sea fishing. And so Jerry's reasoning was to just put a capper to the end of this experience. And then who knows what he would do next. And so I did. I went to Corpus Christi, Texas with Jerry Florence in his sister's van to go deep sea fishing. I told him I was a little nervous because I get seasick. So he had this great idea that he would have me take Dramamine for 24 hours before we would go out. So I did. Long story short, it's boat time, and we are getting on this chartered deep sea fishing boat, and something doesn't feel right. And I'm looking at all the cast of characters, and they're kind of old, greasy men who look like they've been doing this their entire lives. It looks like they have spare lures in their pockets. And we had to rent fishing poles. And so we get on this thing and off we go into the Gulf of Mexico. And how many of you have been on a boat when the boat is going like this? And so we were on the boat, and it's just getting farther and farther and farther out, away from any kind of semblance of land. And again, I'm really kind of nervous, but it's time. So they anchor the boat, and we're out in the midst of this open water. And I take my little fishing pole and I cast my line, and everybody else positioned themselves around the circumference of the boat. They all had their spot and they cast their pole. And I am not lying to you. Within 10 minutes of me casting my line, something bit. But it wasn't just something. It was something that seemed to be a little bit unmanageable, because all of the sudden the line started whizzing and whizzing and whizzing and whizzing. And I'm gripping the thing. And I will just say that about the next 15 to 20 minutes was me circling the boat round and round, having to go under other people's rods and just making a complete nuisance of myself and hanging on for dear life, because who knew what was on the other end. And by the time all of that was done, and some of those seasoned men stopped what they were doing and got their nets to help me finish the job, I pulled in, it was a 47-pound king mackerel. And I don't know if that's big comparatively to any kind of record or anything, but I just remember that I got my picture taken when I was back on shore holding the boat, and it was in the Corpus Christi newspaper. But a 47-pound king mackerel. And my hands were all bloodied and cracked from holding on to this thing. And most of the men were cordial. They were laughing and they were like patting me on the back and saying, good job, good job. And I'm probably having a little PTSD at this moment because I don't know what just happened. But there were a couple of those men who were not happy. They were not happy that this green fisher, and green literally because I was nauseous, that this green kid had caught this amazing huge fish. And one of them muttered under their breath, beginner's luck. And there was this interminable ride back of the boat back to shore. And that's when the picture was taken with the fish. And so it was this crazy thing that happened to me. I think I was like 19 or 20 years old. So I used to think about that story a lot, and I used to really focus on what the man said, what he muttered under his breath, beginner's luck. Time goes on. I enter into the realm of spirituality and metaphysics, and we have conversations, don't we, about there is no such thing as luck? Because when we talk about the word luck, if we subscribe to that, what we are saying is that there is then some outside force who is manipulating the outcome and that we have given up control. And so the idea of good luck or something happened because of luck then must be readjusted in our thinking as we hear new information. And I remember hearing that and thinking about that deep sea fishing trip and hearing about there's no such thing as luck and thinking about that deep sea fishing trip until one day when I was really dwelling on the distinction between resistance and allowing. You know how they say in A Course in Miracles that there's only two things happening, love or fear. So I was experimenting with the fact that maybe another way to describe that is that there are two energies, and one is an energy of allowing, and one is an energy of resistance. And often what we do moment to moment throughout our entire day is we vacillate between those two energies. We're either in complete allowing or we're in resistance. A lot of the resistance you can imagine is unconscious, right? There has been this sort of layered practice, unconscious practice and acceptance of a particular conditioning in our mind that is resistant or even repellent in nature. And no matter what good might be wanting to interface with us, it can't, because that energy is the predominant energy. And then there's the energy of allowing, which goes with all of the open-heartedness, the beginner's mind, and the non-attachment. And so when I thought about beginner's luck, and there's no such thing, what I came to realize was, and I thought that this was pretty profound for me, that it's actually beginner's allowing. And that's the title that I gave your Reverend David, beginner's allowing, meaning that anytime there is a clean slate, a fresh perspective inside of us, what does that mean? One thing, it means that we have not accumulated any sort of cynicism or opinion. It's a fresh slate, right? We walk into this experience. I walked into that experience of deep sea fishing without registering the idea that no one catches a fish in the first 10 minutes of casting their line. You know, there's got to be a fisherman's rule book that says that that's not possible. I didn't know any of those rules. It just happened. And did it happen because there was no resistance? There was complete, total 100, okay, I'm going to throw this thing out, and boom, there's a 47-pound king mackerel. And I loved the perspective, and I loved the teaching possibility of the phrase beginner's allowing. You might want to even write that down, beginner's allowing. What needs to happen, or what energy system or space do we need to be in order to be more with that than in an old, stale form of resistance? And again, the resistance, mostly unconscious. And so it's one thing to talk about this, remember, but it's another to go, how do we catch ourselves? How do we catch ourselves in the moment of the resistance? And then what do we do in that moment to shift to that state of allowing, that beginner's allowing, the clean slate, right? How do we do that? What are the practicalities around that? So one of the things that helped me most with that, because I will say, you don't have to practice when you walk into new territory and you don't have any history, right? Another example, when the job here in Atlanta opened for Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, I would say at the time it was one of the more prime open pulpit jobs. There was a big legacy involved here. And so people came out of the woodwork to candidate. And I was not even interested in candidating. I was telling Harold, we were talking about the Camino. This was 14 years ago. I had gone off and walked the Camino de Santiago for the first time. And I was trying to grapple with my mind of what was next for me. And one of the things that I felt impressed to do was to complete my work in Mobile, Alabama, and go back to working for my nonprofit full time, to travel and speak and sing and talk about my nonprofit and do it that way. I felt that that was the next step. So when I got back from the Camino and the phone rang from Atlanta and they said, "Hey, would you throw your hat in the ring?" Most of the time to those questions, I always said no, but it's like the yes came out of my mouth before I could pull it back in. I said, "Yeah, sure." But I did it because it wasn't that I wanted the job. I just thought, well, that'll be a fun exercise. Let me just drive to Atlanta and candidate. And, probably nothing will come of it. So I was the first candidate out of many, many, many. And I had the flu. I had called them and I had asked if I could switch in the lineup. And they said, no, everybody's made their travel arrangements. You need to come in first. So I came, snot, made a joke about it, talked, and kind of left it. And months went by because the process was very lengthy for them. And I get a call and they said, the job is yours if you want it. And I think what was interesting about that, and this is no fault of anybody, but everybody else really, really wanted it. And I was like, yeah, okay. There was this kind of non-attachment around it. And I have found, and maybe you have too, that there are moments in your life when you're like, I'll just do this. And there's no energy or gripping or urgency or even fear around it. There is just a playfulness within the participation without any expectation. So that kind of goes in alignment with this beginner's allowing. So I'm like, I want more of that. I want to be able to be mindful of the times when I am very much engaged in the resistance, especially the times when I don't know that I'm doing it. And here's the thing that helped me the most. It was from the Abraham Hicks material. And Esther Hicks said one time that your energy is where you last left it. Your energy is where you last left it. Didn't understand what she was talking about. Just kind of went right over my head. But the more that I would hear her repeat that in other lessons and other broadcasts and things, the more I began to understand what she was saying. So, for example, I think her example was that whenever they would stay in hotels, they wanted to, they didn't want to stay in the room next to the elevator shaft because of the sound of the elevator. And one night they wound up there anyway. And Esther said she noticed her energy and this negativity that she had towards this specific hotel. And she had the foresight to realize that this hotel was in a critical geographical spot, and she knew that they would be coming back to this place. And she said, if I leave this hotel with this feeling, the energy that I have towards this hotel will be here when I return. And I went, I got it. What's the place that I have disdain for? The post office. Back in that day, I was in the post office all the time. The church had a P.O. box, constantly mailing things out all of the time. I would show up, and I'm sure you've had this experience too. There would be one teller and a super long line. And everybody in the line would complain. And I thought, the energy, my energy, this is where I leave it every single time because I walk out. Ugh. And so the one time that I realized that my my resistance was pushing it away instead of my allowing was to pretend to walk into the post office as if I had walked into the post office for the first time. So I walked in, there's all these people, and I went, wow, popular place. Now, these are little mind games that I'm having. And I began to do what she used to call a rampage of appreciation. So instead of immediately going, how long is this going to take? I can't believe there's one person, behind the window. I started to go, wow, look at all the flyers and the graphics on the bulletin board. I wonder who made those. I wonder what kind of skill set they had to have in order to be able to create that information. Look at the architecture, cinder blocks. I wonder how they managed to do all of this. Wow. Have you ever really stopped and thought about the concept of mailing a letter? You lick something, you put it on a thing, and somebody takes it, and it can go all across the world. Isn't that incredible? This is the type of now mental exercise that I'm doing while I'm waiting in line. Instead of focusing on what is wrong, I'm now beginning to shift it as if it's the beginning thing, as if I'm understanding the concept of a postal service for the first time and being grateful for it. So I played this little game until it was my turn to go to the window. And I'm greeted by this man, and he looked at the return address, and it said the CSL that I had and the address, and he goes, "What's that?" And now I'm conscious of all the people waiting behind me. So I just give him an abbreviated thing. And I said, "I tell you what, I'm in here all the time. I'll bring you something next time." He goes, "That'd be great." I go back to the post office the next time. I repeat the process as if I'm doing this for the first time. Again, this is my way of trying to be mindful of my resistance. And I get up. I had brought him a magazine. I gave him a magazine. I said, "Maybe you'll enjoy this. If you have any questions, I'm here all the time. Write your question down and we'll meet again." And we established this playful relationship. I will jump to the end of the story and I'll say that he ended up coming to the center. He ended up bringing his family, and he ended up becoming an integral part of our board. All of that, suffice it to say, because there was something within me that became mindful of my energy is where I last left it. And so it isn't that you and I can erase the history and erase the circumstances of many, many things that we have had in our life, erase the interfacing of relationships and difficult circumstances and things that have gone on with jobs. But oftentimes, as I say to people that I work with, I said, you must become mindful that if you leave a job like this, you will enter into the next job like this. The energy of that. Worked with a young man who lived in Alaska in this small town. And he said, I'm so glad he got this great job. We had worked on it and he got this great job. And he says, "I can't wait to get out of this small town. I hate it here." And I said, "Okay, do me a favor. Go back for a moment." I said, "Are you willing, before you take off for Juneau for this big job in the big city, would you be willing to drive around your small town and go to pivotal moments in your adolescence and your growing years, and instead of cursing it, bless it? Would you be willing to go to the lake or to that diner or to this building or to this home or to this porch or wherever it was that you spent a lot of your formative years? And again, instead of cursing it, can you create a reconciliation in your mind, an allowing that somehow, some way, all of those elements and all of those things played a critical part in you wanting to leave, and then not only wanting to leave, but finding something that you are passionate about, that you're excited to start on this new career. And he did it. And the next time that we talked, he said, I would have never thought to have done that before. I would have just packed my bags and gotten out of here as fast as I can. But you and I have the ability to go back. If we can't go back physically to places, we can go back mentally to circumstances and events that have been less than pleasant and tap into what is the energy with that. Because we can establish an energy or a belief that says we are inept. And so no matter what it is that we try to embark upon that's next, now we're carrying that what? The energy of being inept. And so the beautiful thing about true beginning and showing up for something that we've never done before is that we don't have to try this hard. But how many things are like that still within the bandwidth of our years left on the planet? What things have we not done yet? But you see, if we can not wait for those things, but recreate those things in the everyday, How many of you have gone into stores, retail stores, and said this in your mind? You just can't get good help these days. And I find that if I go into a retail establishment and I think the thought, I can't get good help these days, then the next time I have to go back to that establishment, I'm just going to pick up and repeat the process because my energy is where I last left it. So it isn't so much about beginner's luck as it is about beginner's mind, beginner's allowing. And yes, do we have the capability of cultivating that? You bet. You bet. And I can almost guarantee that there is something right there that is niggling in your mind about, yeah, this is the situation or this is the place that really annoys me. And so what's beautiful about that is don't make that wrong, but celebrate the fact that that thing is wanting to get your attention because that thing is a master teacher. That thing is the calling card that is beckoning us to go to that point and establish or reclaim the power that was diffused because we developed resistance to it. Now think of this then as a lifestyle. There's so many beautiful things then that can be witnessed when we begin to check in and try to or work with or open our hearts to having this sustainable beginner's mind. I came across this story. This man's name is, Shiro Oguni. Shiro Oguni is a Japanese man, and in 2015, somewhere in Tokyo, he went to visit a friend in an elder care facility or memory care facility. And he said he went in and he became so disheartened because there were so many people in this facility who still had a lot of vitality in them, but their brain functionality was diminishing. And he said what he saw in all of this was isolation, that somehow the people that were involved in their lives had like dropped them off in this facility. And he just felt that they were isolated and they still had tremendous value. And so that sadness sparked an idea inside of him. And he was a rather clever businessman. And so he opened up a pop-up restaurant. And he named the restaurant Restaurant of Mistaken Orders. And he hired all patients from memory care facilities as the wait staff. And he put all of this together. And what it was, and they made sure that they had really delicious food. But the rule is that if you're coming to eat at the Restaurant of Mistaken Orders, you have to leave your expectations and your history of dining outside the door. You have to come in and you have to be of pure heart, because most of the time what you order will not be what you get. And they started to tell the different variations of the stories of many times these waiters and waitresses would forget what they were doing, and they would just sit down at the table with the families or the people and just converse. And, and he said it was twofold. The blessing was twofold. It wasn't that these people got to participate and be engaged in life again, but really the surprise blessing was how it affected the people who deliberately came there to eat, because they came there with an open heart. They came there willing to let the flow and the unexpected and all of that stuff not be derailed. They were willing to just go with the moment in such a beautiful and honoring way. And it was such a success that during COVID, as they were revamping this, there are more and more countries now that are looking at how they can begin to open their version of the restaurant of mistaken orders. And each of these things, I tell you these little stories and these little anecdotes because there's something profound about this practice. There's something profound about noticing what we argue about, what we hold in disdain. And if how we do anything is how we do everything, then the level of our resistance and pushback just diminishes the ratio of all of that we have available to allow to us. And so it's beginner's mind, and it's allowing, and it's a gift that is free and is something that calls to each and every one of us. Thank you so much. Blessings.
Thank you, David. I love that talk. And Harold, let's go to a song right now before our prayer.
Glad to know that the restaurant of mistaken orders has started to go beyond just Japan's borders, and no expectations required. Only open-minded people get hired, 'cause they're living in the I don't know. Living in the I don't know. Embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know. The art of uncertainty is a new paradigm. Leaving all our baggage and preconceived notions behind. Standing at the edge of what is to be. Stepping into the unknown consciously and intentionally. Yeah, that's when we're living in the I don't know and loving it. Living in the I don't know. Embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know. Every day of our life is a chance to learn and grow. In fact, I've made a living out of making it up as I go. Whether you're pushed by desperation or pulled by inspiration, you can learn to let go and follow your highest vibration. Living in the I don't know and loving it. Living in the I don't know. Embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know. When we learn to lose our fear of the unknown and get that beginner's allowance, make you feel like home. Living in the I don't know. Living in the I don't know. and loving it, embracing the mystery and going with the flow. Living in the I don't know.
Thank you so much, Harold. Let's just stay in the sweet space that this service has established. I'm thinking about the rampage of appreciation that David was talking about, and thinking about that rampage is the rampage of allowing, is the rampage of love instead of fear, is the rampage of healing and possibilities. And so it's with this garments, with this space, with this dressing that we put on everything, with this lens that we look through, I want to look at everything that way. So with this energy that is palpably real and powerful, I bring that into this prayer right now. As I pray for everywhere in the world where this energy is not, knowing that there is nowhere that God is not. So I pray for every place, situation in the world or in me that needs to be recovered to this true reality of love. And I bring into this space for healing and wholeness and possibilities, members of our community and anyone else that you'd like to picture right now in your mind's eye, picturing them. Just loving them, appreciating them. I call this good. And so it is.